Welcome to the Run Radio podcast. My name's Trina. Run Radio is all about inspiring strides in business, life, and beyond. And my guest today is going to tell us how to do some of that when it comes to taking care of ourselves. Dr. Glenn Livingston, welcome.
It's very nice to be here. Please call me Glenn. I'm looking
I
forward to this.
will.
Yeah.
You've written several books. You've got thousands of readers, fans, followers, and more. You talk about something that I feel like everybody at some point in their life either has not necessarily struggled with, but maybe been up against in some form. And that is the way we eat and how we take care of ourselves. How did this get on your radar?
Oh, it got on my radar because I couldn't stop eating pizza and Pop-Tarts for 20 years. I'm not just a doctor who works with overeaters. I had a very serious problem myself. And I actually, I went a very psychological route, which didn't really work for me. But I've come from a family of 17 therapists. So sometimes you have a hammer and everything looks like a nail. And,
Right.
when something broke in the house, everybody asked it how it felt and nobody could fix it.
Yeah.
But I went on the theory that if I could fill the hole in my heart, I wouldn't have to fill the hole in my stomach. And I went to see the best doctors and psychologists and psychiatrists, and I confessed my soul, and I went on a very rich journey, which I think made me a better person, a more compassionate person, but it didn't really help me with the food. Every time I'd try something new, I'd get a little thinner and then a lot fatter, a little thinner and a lot fatter.
Yeah.
I was almost 300 at one point with all kinds of health problems. Yeah. And there were three things that changed the paradigm from which I approached this.
Mm-hmm.
One of them was that I married a woman who worked for industry. She worked for big food and big pharma. And she was flying around all the time, so we didn't have kids and I didn't commute. So in addition to my clinical practice, which was child and family psychology, I work with, couples and families, not with overeaters. The opportunity for a second career kind of, was right there because I had so much time in my hands. And so I started consulting for big food and big pharma too. And over the years, while I was going through all of these psychological explorations, I saw that the big food companies were creating these hyper palatable concentrations of starch and sugar and fat and excitotoxins and salt. And it's all engineered to hit the bliss point in the reptilian brain without giving us enough nutrition to feel satisfied. And the result was, addiction. And every time you're looking for love at the bottom of a bag or a box or a container, there's some fat cat in a white suit with a mustache laughing all the way to the bank, right?
Right.
I said, the point was, I said, that has nothing to do with my soul. That has nothing to do with, when my mama dropped me on my head or that I was in a bad marriage. It had nothing to do with that. And so I said, this is an outside force that, was coming at me with millions of dollars behind it. I saw that the advertising industry was really good at convincing people that they needed this stuff, that that's where the good stuff was. They could push those evolutionary buttons, like, for example, making very bright multicolored packaging, which in nature would signal a diversity of micronutrients that were available. Like that's why we're told to eat the rainbow. Red tomatoes and green lettuce and blueberries and yellow carrots or orange carrots. But there really wasn't nutrition in there. They were taking the nutrition out and kind of focusing on the packaging. So that was another industry with millions of dollars that was coming at my reptilian brain. And then I realized that the reptilian brain doesn't really know love. Like here I am trying to solve the problem by loving myself more, but it doesn't really know love. I remembered my neurology studies in graduate school. I'm not a medical doctor. I'm a PhD, not an MD, but we had some neurology. And I remembered that the reptilian brain, let's say this is the reptilian brain, it looks at something in the environment and it says, do I eat it? Do I mate with it? Or do I kill it? It's like a bad college drinking game, eat, mate, or kill. There's no love there. There's no love. This is all survival impulses. On top of that is the mammalian brain, which says, if you before you eat meat or kill that thing, what impact will that have on the people that you love and your tribe and your family? And then on top of that is the neocortex that says, wait a minute, before you eat meat or kill that thing, what impact will that have on your longer term goals like health, fitness, weight loss, but also
Mhm.
spirituality and music and art and everything that's meaningful to you as a human being in our civilized society. This part of the brain actually has the ability to knock out the rest of the brain if there's a perceived emergency. This is why rational thinking goes out the window when you're at Starbucks and there's a chocolate bar in front of you at the counter, and you have all these interesting thoughts in your head. So even though you read a diet book over the weekend, decided you were going to do it. Um, so ultimately, I really am condensing this for radio, but
Sure.
ultimately, I wound up changing my paradigm sometime around a little after my 40th birthday. I kind of put it all together and I said, I think that I need to be more like an alpha wolf in my own mind. I need to be the leader of all these thoughts, the same way that I'm in control of the other organs of my body. If my bladder were to say, Glenn, you really have to pee now, I would say, you know what? I'm talking to Trina. It's going to be a half hour or so, and then we'll take care of you. I wouldn't totally ignore it, but I would take care of it in
Right.
a very specific way. If there is an attractive woman on the street, I don't go run out and kiss her. Right, there are ways to approach that. I'm actually pretty shy, so I go running the other way. But you know what I mean, in a
Sure.
civilized society, and we all expect to be able to do that, despite the fact that these are very powerful biological urges. Yet when it comes to food, people feel like they can't help themselves, like the biological urge has to be in control. And I said that can't be true. So I did something a little embarrassing, and I was not going to teach this or write about this. I never know I was going to have millions of fans. Um, I decided to call I'm always embarrassed at this part of the interview because I'm actually a sophisticated psychologist, but I decided to call my reptilian brain. I said, that's just my inner pig. That's all that it is. You don't have to call it a pig. You can do
Right.
this with a food monster or anything else. But I said, that's my inner pig. I said, I'm going to draw a really clear line in the sand so I know when this thing is getting active. And I made a rule like I will never again eat chocolate on a weekday. I'll only have it on a Saturday after I've worked out. Um, and with that very clear line in place, it functioned kind of like a tripwire, so that if I was in a Starbucks and I heard a little voice on my head that said, you know what, Glenn, you worked out hard enough. A couple of bites are not going to kill you. You can always start your silly diet again tomorrow. It'll be just as easy. I'd say, wait a minute, that's not me. That's my inner pig. It's squealing for pig slop. Chocolate on a Wednesday is pig slop. I don't eat pig slop. I don't let farm animals tell me what to do. And as ridiculous as that was, as crude as it was, as vulgar as it would wake me up at the moment of impulse and make me say, whoa, wait a minute, who's in charge here? Right.
Yeah.
And it would give me these extra microseconds, like a space between stimulus and response, to make the right decision if I wanted to. I can't say I always did right away,
Yeah.
but I was no longer confused. I no longer thought it was this deep psychological issue. I just thought, I got to work on opening up this space and figure out what to do in that space so I can make a better decision. I'll pause there for a moment because I feel like I'm monopolizing things.
No,
Um,
absolutely interesting. I'm glad you were vulnerable enough to share that part of what you called you gave it a name, and it may not be the kindest or sweetest name, but it was a name that made you stop and pause
mhm.
and gain your thoughts and able to take a beat. And I think that's very important for people to hear. You weren't beating yourself down over and over and over and shaming yourself, but you were saying, "Hey, hey, hey."
Yeah. And then what I did next was there were a couple of things I could do in that pause to make a difference.
Yeah.
For me personally, it was mostly logically disempowering what my pig would say. So
Yeah.
it'll say it'll be just as easy to start your silly diet again tomorrow. The truth is that it won't. The way the brain works, by
No.
the principle of neuroplasticity, you could look it up if you want to, what fires together wires together.
Yeah.
So if I have a craving for chocolate and I have the thought, I'll just start again tomorrow, it'll be just as easy. and then I indulge in the chocolate, I will have reinforced both the thought and the craving so that tomorrow I'll have a stronger craving for chocolate and I'll be more likely to say, start again tomorrow, tomorrow. So you can only ever use the present moment to be healthy. And if you're in a hole, you got to stop digging. So I'd like write down what my pig was saying and why it was wrong. You know, one bite won't hurt. Well, one bite's a tragedy because it's never really just a bite and it always invites, more and more and more. And when I make a boundary is important because it's the difference between who's in charge, me or you, Mr. Pig. And I want to be in charge. I don't want you to run my life. So one bite is a tragedy. Every bite counts. That's how I got better. I didn't do a lot of the other things that I've learned since then working with 2,000 clients. Um, I got better over a couple of years keeping a journal about all the crazy things that my pig said and what was wrong with it. And that became my first book, which is how I got famous for being the pig guy.
Oh,
um, fast forward about 8 years, and the book takes off. We get almost 2 million readers and a couple of thousand clients. And we worked with a coaching program because there was a lot of requests for coaches, and I trained some coaches to work with me. And for the first 7 of those years, what we mostly did was focus on fixing people's thinking about food quicker. So we identified all the unique things that people's pigs would say, and there are only maybe 40 or 50 of them. Some people have a little creative variation, but mostly everybody's pig says more or less the same thing. And we figured out what the answers to those were, like why they were incorrect. And we taught people to, find that space, disempower their pig. And there's a calmness that will go along with it. And I would say, most of the time people could make the right choice. Not all the time, but most of the time. And what we found when we measured the results was that we got an 89.4% reduction in overeating episodes during the first month. This is for people who engaged with our coaches and actually did the work. Some people buy programs that they don't do anything, and we couldn't get results for those people, of course.
right.
But for the people who would engage with their coach at least every other day, we got, we're really very effective at the 1 month mark. But we discovered that at the 6 month mark or the 1 year mark, it really dropped down a lot. It was like,
Okay.
55%, something like that.
Mm-hmm.
And it was bifurcated into a group of people that kept using the tools and they were doing pretty well, maybe around the 80% level, and the people who didn't use the tools who really were doing horribly. And then I wanted to figure out, why are people stopping to use the tools?
Yeah.
Turns out it all relates to what I would call the screw it, just do it response. What
Okay.
people would say, I got to this point where, yes, doc, you fixed all my thinking. We call me coach, not doc, but you fixed all my thinking about food. I don't have any excuses. I know this is the wrong thing to do, but oh, well, what the hell? Screw it, just do it. Tried to figure out what's underneath that. And it turns out what's underneath the screw it, just do it response is what I would call organismic distress. Any type of perceived stress or emergency. So it could be that the person doesn't have regular nutrition. They were skipping a meal or two, or maybe they destabilized their nutrition with something really, really sugary. And so their blood sugar was up and down, or their dopamine system was up and down, and it was too uncomfortable to keep going. Or they didn't get enough sleep, or they didn't drink enough water, or they felt too isolated from, friends and family and a tribe. And then we started to add this kind of self-regulation impact techniques into the system, like, breathing and focusing on eliminating some decision making from your life. And then we got much better results when we did that. I don't have a double blind or really
Yeah.
substantial study to prove it yet, but
So your first step, of course, was recognizing that you yourself had to get your thoughts under control and act in the way that was going to benefit and yield the better results. What do you say to the people that finally start to get there, but then they're at Coffee Bucks with their pal that says, "Oh, stop, you're fine." And then, then they're at war with this. Well, I know that I'm really not supposed to do this. My friend says to do it. How do they work through that problem on the spot?
So, um, if you thought of me as a personal trainer, the first thing I would
Mhm.
teach you to do is use the appropriate form and how to hold the bar, right? If I was
Okay.
teaching you how to do squats or something,
Yes.
and I make sure you could do the squats with no weights on the bar. But then you'd be facing a situation where you had to put some weights on the bar and it would be substantially harder. And so the first thing that's important for people to recognize is it's an accomplishment to hold the bar and squat and be able to overcome this in your day-to-day life when you're not in those difficult situations.
Hmm.
Social situations are hard because the fabric of society is really woven by breaking bread together, eating the same thing that everybody else is eating. Um, and we live in a society where uh, it, people all seem to tacitly agree to slowly kill themselves with food while everybody laughs it off, right? Ha ha
Right.
ha, I'll go get the cheesecake, right?
Right.
And so the first thing is to recognize you're facing a difficult situation and we're not going to send you into battle armed with a plastic helmet. The second thing is you can arrange your rules kind of like an archery target. So you could have a bullseye for day-to-day interactions, which should cover at least 80% of your eating. But then you could have a second rung around the bullseye with a slightly looser rule that would cover certain social situations. So maybe you would say, you know, look, I will never have chocolate on a weekday again. Um, and that would be the bullseye, unless I'm out with friends no more than once a week, in which I can have 2 ounces, right?
Hmm.
And so you can create a little bit of a safety valve. This works for 2 out of 3 people, just to make it easier for social situations. You can also work it out to meet the social needs that are underneath the desire for everybody to eat the same thing
Yes.
without eating the same thing. What that looks like is, let's say I'm going to, a poker game at my friend's house, and I don't actually play poker. I don't know why I always say that, but I'm going to a poker game at my friend's house, and he comes running up to me with a beer, and I don't drink, or he comes running up to me with a cupcake. He says his sister made them. He brought me one. You're gonna love it. Well, what you need to understand is that part of what he's trying to do is welcome me into the group. Is
Yeah.
that this is what we do in this group. We have these norms. We eat cupcakes from our sisters and wives and everything like that. Um, and so if you say, "Oh, I can't do that. I'm on a diet," you're kind of rejecting his effort to cohere the group together.
Uh-huh.
What you want to do is think of what I call an alternative love gift. If he's trying to love you back into the group or love you into the group for the first time, you don't want to direct that effort. You want to have something you can ask him for that he can give you. You know what? My stomach's a little bit upset. I don't think I can eat anything right now. I had too much at lunch. Do you think you have any mint tea? Or maybe, you know what? I didn't bring a sweater. It's a little cold in here. Do you think I could borrow one of your sweaters? Or it could just be information. I couldn't get an internet connection. I'm dying to know what's happening in the game. Could we just go, check on your wireless?
Hmm.
You got to ask for something that they can give you, as opposed to say, no, I can't have that thing that you're trying to give me.
Yeah.
Because they want to love you back into the tribe. So you're offering them an alternative love gift, another way to do it. So that's basically what you do. There's more to it, but those are the easiest things to do.
Those are because I repeatedly hear how the social situations, like you're saying, can really end up breaking people, or
Yeah.
it's nothing to do but go out or sit down and see a movie. It's like it gets to be a challenge to find creative ways to spend that time together besides, always going for a walk or something like that. And or, sitting. So those ideas are always welcome.
Yeah. There you go. There you go.
So, what else do you offer to people that are just overwhelmed by the whole concept of trying to get their cravings under control?
An awful lot. Um, the first thing is to understand that if you have stronger cravings than most people, it's because you have a healthier brain than most people, not because you have a sicker brain than most people.
Oh, yeah.
Most people say, "What's wrong with me? What's wrong with me? What's wrong with me?" Not realizing, why can't I stop eating? That if they keep asking themselves, "Why can't I stop eating?" You're directing your brain to look for evidence that you can't stop eating. If
Mm-hmm.
you look for evidence that you can't stop eating, you're going to find it, and you're going to convince yourself that you just can't stop eating. You're going to develop a failure identity. So you want to ask yourself, how can I stop eating instead? Or how can I eat a more normal amount instead? Secondly, the biggest thing, okay, I'm sorry. So cravings are a normal, natural part of human physiology. 100,000 years ago, when we were developing them, if we didn't have them, we would have starved. Food
Mm-hmm.
was much scarcer. We had to be very adept at looking for food cues in the environment. And when we saw food cues, let's say a caveman sees a monkey and follows it to a banana tree. When he saw a monkey the next time, he had to get really motivated and really happy to go follow that monkey. So that's why our brains are set up to do that. Um, in the modern environment, it's more like the Dunkin' Donuts store sign, or the smell of a bakery as you pass it or something like that. But if you if you develop cravings in those situations, it's because your brain works. It's not because your brain is not functioning. Um, when you want to extinguish a craving, and your brain is also very efficient, so it's not going to keep craving things that it knows it's never going to do
Mm-hmm.
because it doesn't want to waste energy. But what you need to understand is that the extinction curve, let's say I'm stopping for donuts every day on the way home as I pass the donut store from work, and I'm developing a little punch. So I say, I'll never stop on the way home from work again. And you would think that the craving line is kind of going to go down day by day by day by day by day by day, right? It's just going to go down like that. Because people think that, they make a lot of mistakes, because that's not how it works. What actually happens is it goes for a little honeymoon period, then you have worse cravings than you've ever had before,
Hmm.
right? If this is called an extinction burst.
Mm-hmm.
Um, why does that happen? That happens because in a scarce food environment, there could come a time when food was available at random or intermittently, as opposed to every time you saw a food signal. So Thag, our caveman from 100,000 years ago, could follow a monkey to a banana tree that didn't have bananas as the season wore on. It would not behoove Thag to give up at that point. He should not gradually let go. Rather, it would behoove him to try even harder to follow monkeys, because maybe now monkeys lead to banana trees 50% of the time or 20% of the time. That's still better than having no monkey or no food signal at all. So what the brain does is it tests to see, has the reward become intermittently available at random?
Mm-hmm.
And this is called an extinction burst. I like to call it the where the F are my donuts or where the F are my bananas
Yeah.
reaction. And what happens to most people here is they say, um, I can't take this. This is going to be torturous forever. It's always going to be like this. Obviously, I can never give up. But if you just tell yourself there's nothing wrong, it's going to be miserable for a little while. But if I push through, then my brain is going to say, okay, obviously monkeys don't lead to banana trees anymore. I had to test to be sure that was the case. And then it's going to start coming down towards the 25 to 30 day mark or so. It'll try a couple of more times on a very small level. Then it'll leave you alone. Then you're going to be through the extinction burst, because the brain doesn't want to waste energy. It won't erase the craving. So it's always going to remember that craving. This is why you don't want to you don't want to get cocky at the end and say, okay, I've got this thing,
Yeah.
right? Um, but it won't bother you anymore. You'll be able to go on and do other things. Some people say, well, what if I don't want to give up the donuts entirely? I'll say,
Mm-hmm.
okay, well, you could say, I'll only have it at 10 o'clock on Saturday mornings and no more than 2.
Mm-hmm.
What happens then, tell me if I'm talking too much and you want to say
No,
something.
you're great. Fine.
Okay. What happens then is that it's the same thing that would happen at a casino if the slot machines only paid off at 10 o'clock on Saturday morning. Right now, if you go to the casinos, you're going to see little old ladies sitting at the slot machines and pulling the lever all day long, because you never know when it's going to pay off.
Uh-huh.
So they have to be there. That's what's driving the compulsion, because there's this intermittent random, reinforcement schedule available. But if it only paid off at 10 o'clock on Saturday mornings, the casinos would empty out during the week because people would figure out it only pays off at 10 o'clock on Saturday mornings. And our brains are capable of recognizing those cues. So if you want to have donuts on Saturday mornings, and only at a particular place, or like the more specific it is, the better, then your brain will learn that that's the only place it's available, and you can extinguish the cravings everywhere else. You still have a little bit of sugar dysregulation, so you're going to be a little uncomfortable after you finish the donut because 18 minutes later your blood sugar is going to drop.
Right.
But your brain will learn, and you can do that if you really want to.
I want to go back to when cravings start for a person. I feel like a lot of times we don't recognize that the cravings are more than just a craving, that they are filling a void, or, something emotional, until it becomes a problem, until that person is overweight, or until they're up against a binged disordered eating pattern, something like that. How can someone get ahead of that curve and realize that, wait a second, this is more than just a craving before it gets to that?
There are a couple of ways. One is to create the very specific bright lines, the line in the sand, like I will never have chocolate on a weekday. Have a very specific line so that you know when you're about to cross it. Okay. So that way, when you start to have thoughts and feelings about crossing that line, you wake up and recognize that something's going on. What's actually happening is your survival system, the sympathetic nervous system, is becoming active. Now, there are other signals that system is becoming active. You might get goosebumps. Your mouth might get a little bit dry. I know I could feel it in my eyes. My eyes get a little tense. But you won't recognize that until you start to have a very specific line, because then you'll start to pay attention to what happens just before you reach that line. So you'll become more sensitive to that, and you'll say, okay, I really need something. My first go-to is usually, am I hungry? Am I genuinely hungry? Do I really need some food? And I actually stopped eating chocolate entirely when I started having kale banana smoothies, when I had the craving, because it would usually be at the same time in the afternoon, 2 or 3 o'clock after a hard day's work. And so I started having these kale banana smoothies. And then before I knew it, I craved the kale banana smoothies. They didn't make me high the way the chocolate would, like it wasn't as intensely pleasurable, but the itch was gone. And I wasn't bothered at all by the craving. Yeah.
You had mentioned that journaling and writing down, cause and effect was a big part for you. How important do you think that is in the entire process to keep a notebook handy and be very aware of?
Necessary, but not sufficient. It's not the whole fix.
Yes.
But it's necessary to do that, to fix your thinking, so you don't have the justifications, because those justifications start to make sense after a while. The rest of it has to do with, for example, your breath is always with you, and you can change the activation of your nervous system by changing your breathing. I'm speaking very quickly right now because we have a short segment and I have a lot to talk about. But if I wanted to calm down, I would breathe out for longer than I breathed in. I'd breathe in for a count of 7 and out for a count of 11. Because if I was being chased by a hungry bear, if there was a real emergency, I'd be going. So if I breathe out very slowly for longer than I breathe in, I'm signaling my whole nervous system, my whole being, that there's no emergency here. It's okay to rest and digest and chill out and think and plan for the future. This is not a time we have to run for a hungry bear. And that's really what's happening when you feel like just hand over the chocolate and nobody gets hurt. When it feels like every bone of your body says, no matter what rules I thought about, no matter what I promised myself I was going to do, I really need this chocolate right now. So that's how you do that.
All right.
Is your dog in the background? It's so cute.
He is. He's laying in the sunshine. There's a little strip of sun, and instead of my lap, he's decided he'll take a sunshine fix. So
cute.
Thank you. Cute. I would love for you to come back and tell us more, because you do have a lot to talk about. I'm very passionate about the way we take care of our bodies, especially when it's what we're putting into them. So please come back. If someone is watching this and they're like, I need to know more right now, where can they go to keep up with you?
I'd like to give you a free copy of the book. If you go to defeatyourcravings.com and click the big blue button, you can get the electronic formats for free. Just sign up for the reader bonus list. You'll get it in Kindle, Nook, or PDF format. When you do that, you will also get a set of free food plan starter templates. So this is a diet agnostic philosophy. You can use it with any dietary style as long as you're not starving yourself. So ketogenic, point counting, calorie counting, whole foods, high carb, low carb, it doesn't matter. As long as it's reasonably nutritiously complete, you can work this out. And we created example rules that you can work with. We have to call them starter templates because I'm not a dietitian or a medical doctor, nor is anybody on my staff. So actually someone is, but we're not operating in that capacity.
Sure.
So you'll get that. You get a set of food plan starter templates. And because this sounds very weird and cold in the abstract, you must be saying, why does Trina have this doctor on who has a pig inside of him? It doesn't make sense. It's actually a very compassionate, life-giving process. So I recorded sessions for you. I recorded a set of free sessions, full-length sessions, so you could hear me take people from feeling hopeless and powerless and confused about food to feeling hopeful and powerful and enthusiastic in just one session. It's all at defeatyourcravings.com. Click the big blue button, defeatyourcravings.com.
All right. Thanks, Glenn, so much for sharing. Be sure you're following along at runradio.net.